Hey, good Wednesday morning, and thanks for checking out your latest weather yield outlook here. Michael Clark with BAM Weather, and I've got a lot to discuss with you today, including an updated forecast for July, which may be a pretty significant trend to monitor here, if you will, for as we get closer into late June and into July for some significant heat and the risk of thunderstorm clusters increasing, and some of those those could be severe. So let's get right into it. I'll kind of go over what I'm talking about today. Drier risks here for the short term, at least the next 10 days or so, and overall just a little bit cooler in terms of relative to normal. But that heat will start to build in, I think, pretty quickly by the 16th or 17th or so of the month, as we see, I think, a possibly legitimate heat wave developing, if I could actually talk here this morning. Northwest flow risk mid to late June as well, especially into July. I've got our new July outlooks, some La Niña updates, and we will obviously take a look at the latest in terms of the yields as well. Clarity platform here showing at least the drier forecast developing here for me across the area. Sunny and 70s for getting into the upper 80s at least mid-month here, but there's a dry stretch coming. This is the rainfall forecast the next 24 hours. You can see as the front moves through, it'll bring the colder air in. It's dry in the central plains, wetter there in the east. We'll kind of go over that here in detail in just a moment. But here's a plant progress update here. Looking at corn, cotton, and beans right now in terms of what's been planted. And we're watching that 2019 to 2023 average right there. You can kind of see those on all of the charts here with where we are in terms of relevant as it relates to normal. You can see we are above normal now in the beans. We're above the 5-year normal planted in beans. Cotton, we're slightly above last year and the normal. And corn, we're just slightly above the normal, but below last year's pace. So you can see where we were certainly below that normal right there earlier in May, but the pattern has become at least a little bit more favorable to get the things into the ground and get them planted, and we've certainly started to see that. So everything right now normal to even possibly above. When we look at rainfall here the last 7 days, and you can see why a lot of that has happened. It's dried up in Iowa, Illinois, Indiana, portions of Missouri, South Dakota, but places that have really needed the rain have gotten it. And that's certainly been encouraging. A large area of replenishable moisture here across Nebraska and into western Kansas and the panhandles there of Oklahoma and Texas as well, where rain has certainly been lacking. They have really made up for it the last 7 days. You can see the stark differences, though. If I go to change the two maps, you can see how wet it was the week prior, as there was a lot of rain there. But again, you can see the last 7 days, we've really dried up the pattern a little bit, and that has allowed for, again, work to get done out there. So certainly not, I don't think anyone's complaining about the change there overall. As this front works through, a couple of stronger thunderstorms are certainly going to be possible here in the area this evening. Locally, a couple of severe storms. In fact, I think there's a severe thunderstorm warning in northwestern Indiana right now, actually, with this line of storms moving through. Locally, inch and a half of rain here, not out of the question. This is the front. As it continues to move to the east, it's going to bring the cooler and drier air in with it as well. That's the next 2 days. Here's the next 7 days. Not a whole lot to add except for portions of the Arklatex regions, southern Missouri, down into the deep south where a little bit more rain, and the northern Canadian prairies and north there of the Great Lakes. Some rainfall there as well. Over the next 2 weeks, if you recall on last week's weather yield episode, we talked about drier risks developing in the month of June, especially the first part of it. And we are certainly seeing that. This is the next 14 days rainfall departure forecast. A departure just means from normal, okay? And you can see where that pattern is in terms of the dryness. It's a large chunk of the growing region. Most of the primary U.S. growing regions will run below normal rainfall the next 2 weeks, okay? I think that starts to transition back to wetter as we get into the second half of June and as the pattern starts to heat up. All right, so that's kind of going to be the focus today. The 1 inch plus rainfall probabilities the next 10 days, The only place you're going to find them in any part of the U.S. growing regions would be eastern Oklahoma, southwest Missouri, and western and northwestern portions of Arkansas. And then over there up into the north and east, some significant probabilities for 1-inch rains, and the northern prairies as well, the Canadian prairies. Anything in terms of 2-inch rainfall probabilities, not really looking like any super high risk areas of that here in the U.S. Again, maybe eastern Oklahoma. There's about an 80% probability there. The highest probabilities of 2-inch plus rains are going to come there across the northern prairies and the portions of Canada, okay, for the next 10 days. Looking ahead on rain, there's week 1 on the top left, week 2, bottom left. And this is where we're starting to note at least the potential as you get late into week 2, early into week 3, so like 18th, 19th, 20th of June, a wetter risk could start to emerge here in the central U.S., and that's going to be based upon the southern U.S. ridge that will be developing that we think could have some impact on the flow pattern, bringing in more storm clusters, northwest flow type pattern into the area. Okay, so it's interesting to note, kind of a little bit of the similarity there to last year, especially in that pattern in the week 2 time frame, where we're dry across the ag belt, wetter to the south. That may start to lift back northward again late week 2 into week 3, which is going to kind of be our focus here in just a moment. Week 1 temperatures, as I mentioned, it's similar to last year, a little bit earlier, but it's cool. I mean, the whole corn and soybean belt, cotton regions here the whole next week will be well below the average temperatures, and it's really going to be really nice weather over the next 7 to 10 days for most people. Not really much to complain about. The heat in week 2 starts to build, especially starting across the west and southwest, and probably expanding and building north and northeast, as the ridge will try to do that with time as well. Okay, and that's why I have this next slide here talking about a heat wave coming. If you recall, a couple of weeks ago in the weather yield episode, we identified in the pattern what we call a wave 5 pattern, where we saw 5 ridges in the northern hemisphere. There's research that indicates that in 16 to 20 days to follow that, a heat wave can develop. And it's probably looking to be closer to that 20 to 25 day correlation, but we're seeing some significant evidence mount that heat wave is probably coming. This is the day 12 or so 850 millibar temperature departure map, and you can see that significant signal for heat there by the morning of the 17th of June. And this is the same map, only what we're looking at is the standard deviation from normal with the 850. And you can see almost a 2 standard deviation from normal 850 temperature signal here over the eastern part of the country. And I think we're going to be looking at some potentially significant heat, to probably a stretch here of multiple 90-degree days. But what I want you to note here too is this southern ridge trying to develop. That flow pattern, when we look at this, I'm going to zoom in a little bit. This is the 588 height line, all right? Along and just slightly kind of north of that and kind of following that line is where we could potentially be looking at that northwest flow pattern offering up the return in moisture and thunderstorm clusters. And that would probably be somewhere right in here as we get late, mid-June, late June, if you will. That could possibly be where we're going to be looking at a return in rainfall chances and storm clusters. And again, some of those that could be intense. All right. And that may arrive as early as the 16th or the 17th. So something to keep in mind. And that's going to kind of be with the first part of this declining angular momentum or global wind forecast. The other thing I want to point your attention to is now the European and the CFS model, both of them indicating another drop in the atmospheric angular momentum being possible late June. What that indicates, you can see the runs here getting stronger and stronger with each run on that. This to me would indicate as we get into early July, the heat risk is really going to start to increase. I'm really concerned about a big south central U.S. heat ridge developing that can potentially lead to record heat, an intense thermal gradient from the southern plains to the Midwest, and thunderstorm clusters in between. Okay, and whenever we see the cool ENSO profile, the strong negative PDO that we have, which we're rivaling the strongest ever, it is the strongest ever, along with a declining angular momentum, all signals are pointing towards significant heat for July. There's really no reason right now to disagree with that general thought process. And you can see as we go through time, 10 to 15, 15 to 20, 20 to 25, and then 25 to 35 day period here, the ridge expanding in the subseasonal model data. We've indicated in the green where that thunderstorm cluster risk will be associated with this as the ridge expands. That's where you're going to be looking at, I think, a derecho or two not out of the question, a really couple of strong thunderstorm clusters getting late June into the first half of July as that ridge expands. All right, there is research, again, indicating where this is going to go. This is looking at the top 5 lowest PDO years, the Pacific Decadal Oscillation, and there's indication that this ridge is going to possibly set up shop to be a significant contributor to the July forecast. All right, and so that's something we're certainly going to be watching right now with the potential of that unfolding. The latest 16 to 30 day outlook shows the much above normal signal starting to grow. This is the end of June through the 1st of July. And I wouldn't be shocked by the week 4 into week 5 that much above is becoming more expansive, and we're looking at even more significant heat being possible here, especially late in the period. Okay, so the temperature forecast well above the 10 and 30-year normals for CDDs, much warmer than last year at this time. And when we look at precipitation, I think we're a good bet of this starting here, where you see this flow pattern. Your ridge is starting here, so the flow pattern is active here. As that expands in that previous graphic I showed you, that above normal precip may start to come in through here. Now this is the thing I want to make sure I mention with that. When we talk about above normal precip in a pattern like this, it's going to be a case of, some of you may get it and some of you may not. It's when you have storm clusters, they can bring rain, but they can bring damage and hit and miss. You can have a bunch of thunder and lightning and wind and only a 1/4 inch of rain, whereas another guy may get 1.5 inches of rain but have an 80-mile-an-hour wind gust. It's one of those things. So I just want to make sure you understand that the above normal rainfall signal is not widespread blanketed rains above normal across the area in patterns like this. Okay, and so that leads me to the updated July forecast thoughts. The updated July forecast thoughts, this was our forecast from back on May 10th, and now here's the June 5th update. We have taken our CDD forecast from 380 to a 395. The analogs have increased dramatically, and we're now forecasting possibly one of the warmest Julys ever. I believe 2011 is the warmest, which is one of our leading analogs. It wouldn't shock me to see 400 CDDs for the month of July. We kind of kept the West the same for the most part. You can see the new outlook here. We combined the much above and added an extremely above normal signal here based on latest research and model guidance. Okay, so this would be the July forecast thoughts right now. And when we take that and we look at precipitation, you can kind of see what happened here. And, we lifted this north a little bit because of where we think the ridge can establish. If the ridge establishes here, it's going to kind of push that flow pattern up a little bit across the top here. Now note what we did. I added some commentary to the map, and I said the forecast comes with risk. The flow pattern will offer up storm clusters that could be severe at times, but we also believe it's a pattern of the haves and have-nots. And what that means is that as these storm clusters flow through here, again, some people are going to get rain, but it's going to accompany, it could be lesser amounts in spots. These clusters they just offer up ununiformed or disorganized rainfall patterns. Okay, that's the best way to put that. So that's the updated July precip there on the right. All right, now let's talk about ENSO real quick, because everything considered, that updated July outlook, we're continuing to see a transition into La Nina. It's a little bit slower than what we had thought maybe 2 months ago or 3 months ago. But nonetheless, we're still seeing the rapid cooling going on across the equatorial Pacific and a stout negative PDO. All right. Looking at the latest forecasts here for us to get into La Nina, again, these blue lines are the latest forecasts, the newest runs. The red lines are the earliest ones. And so you can see how the earliest forecasts and the new forecast trends are a slower transition into La Nina. In our book, that's a bigger risk for heat and a ridge to develop right now, in our opinion, especially for July. You can see this is a zoom in on July. And so the evolution into La Nina obviously plays a key factor into that. And that's the idea for that right now, is it's a little bit slower. It's still coming. But again, that's the July thought process right now, is potentially significant heat, a couple of rounds of it. If the angular momentum crashes negative by June 20th, I'm going to say by the 4th of July weekend in through July 15th could be significantly hot. Several hot days. Okay? So with that in mind, our analogs, our standing call continues for below trend yield in corn. All based on weather, all based on the research there. In fact, the last 2 years were below trend. This 2016 was above. In 2016, there's a lot of similarity in the pattern here. So, it's not out of the question. The problem is we're tossing in years like 95 and again like 11. And the latest 2 is 20 and 22. A lot of thunderstorm clusters in there and some heat. And so right now, the weather's still telling us that this is a below trend yield when we factor in storm risks and heat risks right now. Okay. The soybean forecast, it's slightly above trend right now. I'm suspect of that a little bit because of, in my opinion, what could happen in August. I still have a concern that the rainfall could shut off in August for a time as a significant ridge develops over the Great Lakes as it pertains to the evolution of La Nina. So right now, I just believe that we're not looking at the best conditions for the crops to be the biggest. Still have an okay crop? Sure. Trend line or above? That is not the camp that we are in personally right now. If you have questions, feel free to let us know. Share this with a friend. Toss it on your socials. And we'll be back next week for another episode of Weather Yield here on our YouTube channel. Take care.